As my good friend Derek said right before we started recording this, that game and this entire night, this was Sicko Street. We lived on Sicko Street for the past 3.5 hours or so. We're going to find out tonight how much you like football. That's what we found out over the last 24 hours. I enjoyed myself, Dave, but I think the league is testing me for the first time in a while.
I was enjoying myself right up until like the start of the fourth quarter of Seahawks Texans. Like I've got notes and things I want to talk about, and it was a big night for Detroit, big night for the Seattle defense, such a fun unit. But early fourth quarter, between the Texans refusing to admit that they have a shit offensive line and just barreling through the A gap time after time for no reason with no success, between that and then the Seahawks throwing the ball around in a game that they've got control of. Like, did Ryan Grubb sneak back into the press box and take the headset? Like, between those two things, I was just like, what are we doing? And why are we not going to start this stream until 1 o'clock in the morning? I feel like I'm at the end of a bender right now where I'm just like, I'm coming out of it and I'm like, we did what? They did what? CJ Stroud was doing what? And Sam Darnold was doing what? Just my enthusiasm dipped from like an 8 to a 2 really quickly in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, I feel like the Sicko Street segment that we do on the show is like real estate agent. We're like, would you like to buy this property? It has this fun, fancy little feature. Would you like to buy this property? Are you interested? This was like we had to live in the properties for the first time, and that was a really interesting experience.
When I looked up and there were 13 minutes left in the game, I was like, uh-oh, we're in trouble.
That was the other thing. This was already a long night as is, because it obviously starts at 9 o'clock for you guys, 7 o'clock for me. And then the game lasted like 15, 20 more minutes than a typical NFL game would. Like, just truly the longest night of the year.
I love that analogy a lot, Derek, because like you're all excited when the offer is accepted, and it's like, look what you could do. The bones of this house are so good. Look at the entertainment space you could have. And then that first night when you're sleeping there and like you can hear the water leaking through the ceiling and the foundations making all kinds of weird noises, you're like,
that's the Houston offensive line.
It reminds me, do you guys ever watch Parks and Rec? There's the episode where Werner Herzog is living in that house and he's trying to sell it to Andy in April, and he's going through all the things that are wrong with it. And it's just like, we've had no interest on the count of it being haunted and disgusting.
This is also the Houston offensive line.
Seahawks Texans was haunted and disgusting.
Where do we want to start with this? Do you want to start with the Texans offense and just the Texans disgustingness of it all? Because I feel like that's the most important takeaway. I knew the Seahawks were good. I knew the Seahawks defense was capable of dismantling a bad offense. We've seen that happen already this year, and it happened again. I think there are a few different levels that the Texans reached in this game that they had previously not seen this season. We could start with the decision to not kick the ball out of the back of the end zone with 2:04 left to give them an actual shot in this game. We can start with all of the 3rd and 1s that they did not get, or we can start with the fact, this is where I kind of lean, if you can't get a yard in an NFL game, you're fucked anyway.
That is a great place to start. I think we should definitely start there. If you can't get a yard, it's over.
I think that's a great way to frame it, because on the long list of things that pissed me off, I mean, we're not learning from the week 1 Bears-Vikings game with how to handle that situation by the 2-minute warning, just blowing right past it. Tim Settle gets a personal foul that kills whatever chance you have to have a last gasp, because that's how the Texans play defense. But does any of that shit matter when the offense looks like this? And
no.
That's
been in the game anyway. They won the turnover battle by 3, and it never felt like it was close because of what was happening on offense the entire game.
This is like we thought the Texans might struggle. We were confused at what their plan was on the offensive line. We had every reason to believe that this could be a long season with a lot of reliance on unproven players on the line and pass catchers. This was still like the worst case scenario. And I know Seattle's a great defense. They fly around. I do have a lot of fun stuff I want to say about them, but like, I mean, this was a non-starter, dude. Like, I don't know what to say. It's like stunning. And then, like I said, the the play calling not adapting to that reality really bothered me. Like 2 in a row on the goal line trying to play bully ball when this has been the game you're playing all day. Like it really frustrated and confused me.
Worst case scenario is the best way to put it. Obviously, when you watch a game like that, but the whole sell with the Houston offense was if we can get this offensive line to the 25th best in the league, then we'll be okay. We'll be fine and we'll be better than they were last year. Outside of maybe Las Vegas, they're probably the worst offensive line in the league. And obviously Seattle's front is great too. I don't want to take anything away from them. You have to be as good of a front as that to make them look this bad. But this is truly the worst case scenario. And Robert, I know at different points that you've talked with CJ Stroud, being a little bit worried, maybe is he broken a little bit? I think I'm finally there a little bit. And that's not to say that he's never a little bit later in his career, maybe even next year if they fix some stuff, that he can get back to playing really well again. But he's just that was as inaccurate as I've ever seen him. Going back to
this
college,
reminded me of the Jets game. What happened tonight reminded me of the Jets game from last year on that Thursday night, where you're watching what's happening. It's hard not to be worried at what you're seeing.
Right, because there were obviously the Seahawks made a number of good plays, and that's why his completion percentage was low. But even on the throws that were there, he probably just straight up missed 8 throws this game, which is just not a part of his whole why his rookie season worked. Is one, he was really confident and aggressive, but he was also just really accurate, to all levels of the field. And you just 8 times in this game, and obviously he throws 50 times, so you just have more chances to miss throws like that. But he just straight up missed in a lot of situations that they had, which it's not the CJ Stroud that I thought, that he was when he was a rookie a couple of years ago.
They can't do anything. They can't do anything. The only time they had an ounce of success in this game was when they tried to do a little bit of under center play action and they dumped the ball to Dalton Schultz in the flat 3 or 4 times. This team had 17 carries for 56 yards in the game. They finished with a 20% rushing success rate today. And so you'd think, all right, well, maybe if they can get some heavier bodies on the field, use a little bit more play action, get him under center, move the pocket. They tried that early in the season. They couldn't do that either. And so that's kind of what I mean when I say, if you can't get a yard, it's over anyway. I don't think that Nick Haley has covered himself in glory over the first 7 weeks of this season. But I also think that when you're dealing with what they're dealing with up front, there's really not much you can do about fixing it. There's nowhere you can turn, because if you want to sit in the gun and try to get the ball out quickly, which they did against lesser defenses, that makes you way too siloed and predictable against actually good defenses like this one. And then if you're going to sit back there in the gun and they're going to start bringing pressures at you, it's one thing if you're just losing a lot of one-on-ones and maybe we can add a couple bodies in protection. When you can't pick up any sort of pressure, when you have no plan against pressure, that was the issue last year. And so now we're dealing with some of the structural issues we were dealing with last year, and the players from left to right along the offensive line are worse. So if that's happening from those 2 different directions, I just don't really know what you could possibly do with any of this.
Going back and looking at some of the dots of this game, you can see the Texans are in max protect and the Seahawks are bringing 4, and the Seahawks are still getting pressure, still messing up the play for CJ Stroud. And then you're trying to fit the ball into 2 guys running routes.
That was what happened earlier in the season. And that's why I like to see them open things up a little bit more and try to get the ball out of his hands. But again, that's something that you can spam against bad defenses. It's not something you can do against a team like this.
And Dave, that is such a good thing to bring up, because one of the plays I had in my notes was Emenwari had almost an interception where they do go into, they're in 21 personnel. It's under center play action, but the back stays in. The fullback stays in and the tight end to Emenwari's side stays in, and he's supposed to be the flat defender there. And he's like, well, there's nobody here. I'm just going to wheel around to the middle of the field and damn near gets an interception. When you're max protect, there's no flat controller and the throw is a half a second late. You almost throw picks like that.
Emenwari was probably my favorite thing about this game, because we already know who all the dogs on the Seahawks defense are anyway. And in this game, it just felt like he got to freelance and create chaos because they could handle everything else. He made that play. He almost picked Stroud off in the flat on a ball to Braxton Berrios. He was carrying Jalen Knoll down the seam at one point on a slot fade. And that's, when you draft a player like that, I think it's fun to like not need him to be a load bearing guy. And obviously he's been hurt anyway, so the Seahawks haven't needed that. But just adding him into the arsenal as somebody who can do all that type of shit, it was fun to see. Like that was what got me most excited about was the impact he was able to make without having to carry this big responsibility for the Seahawks defense.
Anything else about the Seahawks defensive performance that is not just a product of the Texans' awfulness, Derek, that you wanted to dig into before we get to the other side of the ball?
I mean, not like as an overarching thing, but I just, there was a pretty nice double corner blitz that Mike McDonald threw. Like
he loves that. He does that shit, man. If you're going to
Yeah.
roll out there in a condensed formation, he'll do it. He did it to the Cardinals earlier this year. He very famously did it to the Niners on that Christmas Day game a couple years ago because they play in a lot of those condensed looks. Like every once in a while, he'll let that one rip. And for the most part, his hit rate on it is pretty good.
It's good. It's if you're going to line up that way, you're playing with fire against me. You better watch out.
I shouldn't do this at 12:55 Central. We don't have to have a 15-minute conversation about it, but going back to the concept of CJ Stroud potentially being broken, like how do you balance excuse making for a player that you like with what you're actually seeing in these games? Because for my part, I just don't believe that he became a bad player. I refuse. Like the way that he was good was not smoke and mirrors. And I mean, the situation around him sucks. It's terrible. And he's clearly picked up some bad habits. He's clearly not playing with trust or confidence in virtually anything about his team. And I just, like I said, if it sounds like I'm making excuse making, so be it. But like, I hate what he's going to go through this year and what people are going to say about him. And I don't buy that he's a bad player, but he is in a hopeless situation right now.
If I had to try to pin it down, and I was thinking about this during the game, I do think, and Derek talked about this after his rookie year in a way that I thought was pretty incisive. It was very specific, a lot of the success that offense had that season. They were very explosive. They were an under center play action team that took a lot of shots down the field, and he was good at that, right? There were so many like drift routes to Nico Collins within that offense, and it was beautiful football when it was working. But going to what they're doing now and putting more on his plate where he has more responsibility with protections and there's just more that he has to kind of shoulder when it comes to the mental load, all of that other stuff. He has clearly struggled with that part of his maturation when he has been asked to step outside of that very specific box that existed his rookie year. I don't think that's disqualifying. I think a lot of quarterbacks, when put into circumstances like this, while having to show that growth, might struggle. My concern, Derek, is just that those struggles might develop such bad habits and there might be so much devolving that happens with him within this offensive ecosystem that there might not be any coming back from it down the road. That's what I worry about. Like, he absolutely deserves some blame for the way that he has played. I think your hope is, I mean, Sam Darnold was on the other side tonight, right? Like, how many situations have we seen over the last 2 years where these guys who we know are talented get to mature a little bit? They get a feel. I mean, there was a play that I think is such a specific, perfect example of this where the Texans ran like a little bit of a funky, maybe simulated pressure, but they dropped Will Anderson off the end as the man on line of scrimmage, and Sam just rips it to JSN on a slant immediately. Like, that's something he would not have been able to do 5 years ago. And so the hope might be that as CJ gets a little bit deeper into his career, maybe we see some of the progress that we've seen from some of these other guys. I just don't know if I'm willing to wait 3 or 4 years until that happens, considering how bad it is in this current moment.
I think all of that is like generally fair. Like they did put a lot on his plate, but generally when teams start to try to put more on the quarterback's plate, like the surroundings do get better. Like this to me, like I think the last really big example we got of that was when the Ravens tried to put a lot more on Lamar's plate, but the offense also just got better in a lot of ways. Like they just brought in more talent and stuff. And I think that helped facilitate that. Whereas that's kind of the opposite, I think, has happened in Houston, whereas the offensive line has gotten so much worse and put it on him. And so I'm not really going to do excuse making. Like, I think it's a bad roster. And I'll do a little, like, in the sense that, like, I think almost every quarterback in the league would not be playing well behind this team. But I don't think he's playing very well right now. I think he's playing down to that level. I also still kind of, like Dave said, I still think he's a good football player and will be down the line. It's just that, like, this is a situation that it's kind of being held back. Like, I think there's a chance that maybe the next couple of years are rocky, but in a league where Baker Mayfield and Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold are some of the most productive quarterbacks. Like, I just don't believe that I want to like kick him all the way out of the door yet.
That's kind of how I feel too. And I think that there's going to be a lot of like that meme where you're pointing at yourself in the mirror over the next couple of years with CJ Stroud. If you're going to get to the other side of this, like it's going to be, let me mix my metaphors here. There's going to be like a lot of Andy Dufresne, like miles of shit that you're going to have to crawl through to get to that point with CJ Stroud. But I do believe that there's going to be that moment where we're going to be sitting outside on our knees in the rain, like thankful we made it all the way through.
Last thing I'll say, because I know we got to move on, but like all the guys we just listed, we've been talking about this all year. All those guys got shipped out of the city they were in. I mean,
that's what it required.
We don't see these, we haven't seen these redemption stories often, at least, where it happens like with the organization. And like, I mean, this is my opinion. I hope the Texans are patient enough to exhaust every option before they start pointing completely at the quarterback. And he's not playing well, but I still think trying to work it out with him is probably your better bet. But I mean, it looks like it's going to get pretty bad. And after a certain point, I wonder if that changes people's opinions about that.
I mean, I think the most analogous situation to this is probably Trevor Lawrence, right? Like Trevor Lawrence was not as good as a rookie as CJ Stroud was, but I think there were a lot of these conversations that happened in Jacksonville where you had these flashes of what he could do over his first couple seasons. Like the back half of that 2022 season, let's say that is at least directionally similar to what Stroud was like as a rookie. And then you see some of the environmental concerns and just some of the infrastructure concerns, and the organization decides to ignore or just take some of that with a grain of salt and say, we think he's a good player, we're going to pay him. And then you bring in a coach on offense that you feel good about, and some of the issues and the struggles remain. And so that's the risk you run, is that if you do end up giving him a market contract, which you're going to have to do at some point in the next like year and a half, if you're wrong in the bet that you're making and it's not a structural thing, like it's actually something deficient about him, then there's real downside to making that sort of decision. And so I think that's going to have to play into it.
Life moves pretty fast in this league, guys.
Speaking of, anything else about the Seahawks? I think they're not surprising to see that their offense struggled more than they have in any game this year, considering the state of the Texans defense. We got our first real Sam Darnold moment of this, our first real old Sam Darnold moment of the season, where he fumbles in the end zone. That's a ball that he should just eat, right? And I think, Derek, you talked about this on the previous show. Like, he was just going to be forced into more of those moments where he might look a little bit frantic, and we're going to put him in spots where they're defined drop back situations. And Seattle really hasn't had to play like that. And they struggled relatively compared to what we had seen, but this is also a very good defense. And you also saw plenty of like FU moments from Sam Darnold. I mean, that throw, he hits the JSN coming immediately on the heels of making that mistake in the end zone. Like, there's plenty of good from this offense, from the quarterback and from an emerging star receiver, even if it was a little rockier today than it has been so far this season.
Yeah, this for me was like, I don't feel any worse about the Seahawks. Like, this was the exact game I thought that this offense would play against, like, maybe still the best defense in the league when they're really having a night. And so for like, of course, yeah, we got.
I don't know. I think the defense that they field would give them a run for their money at this point.
I mean, they're both at least in the conversation. And so for Sam to have like, one or two of his oopsies, obviously he throws the interception late in the game to Derek Stingley as well. Like, just doesn't think that he's going to overlap on that seam route. So we got a couple of the tough Sam Darnold moments, but he also still had like 7 really, really good throws and was like still generally fine in this game. And so this was like the exact game I thought they would play. So I don't feel any different about them.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch their next game. Like, that was just one of the thoughts I had in the fourth quarter, or just in a couple of those JSN moments. It's like, I can't believe how much I enjoy watching Sam Darnold throw the ball to Jackson Smith and Jigba. Every season comes with these little surprises we didn't expect, right? Where like you unwrap the season and something is waiting for you that sneaks up on you and becomes something that you really, one of your favorite parts of the year. And that Sam Darnold JSN connection has become that for me this year.
The other thing too, I think like in Seattle, I bet there's going to be some angst about Darnold's decision making at times, and like they're not quite as good as you want them to be at running the ball, and like people are going to say, "Oh, well, this is how you lose games in the NFL. They got away with some bullshit tonight," and I'm just like, or was your approach informed by how hopeless your opponent looked on the other side of the ball, and like this is a game where you kind of know pretty quickly that you can get away with some bullshit. So not a memorable performance. Although, I mean, okay, several memorable throws, like, yeah, the drop in the bucket that you just mentioned, and then the touchdown to JSN as well, where he just ripped it into the end zone between Jalen Petrie and Derek Stingley. Yeah, like there were 2 or 3 really sick throws, but otherwise not a Seattle offensive performance that's going to stick with me for all that long.
When you lose the turnover battle by 3 against a really good defense in the NFL, you're going to take the win, especially when you were in control of the game, the entire game. That touchdown to JSN, to me, is like a picture-perfect representation of the Seattle Seahawks offense. It's a 5-step drop from under center, straight from under center. JSN cooks on that route. Like, you watch his body movement on that route, his lower body movement, and the way that he sets that up, he moves like very few people in the world. And the right guard gets absolutely dusted at the beginning of this play, forcing Sam to throw a missile on time with a guy in his lap to JSN. That right there, all of it, every single aspect of it is the experience of watching the Seattle Seahawks right now.
It's also very funny. I mean, and don't get me wrong, this game was stupid for so many reasons, but like there were so many stupid things that wound up not mattering. The CJ Stroud safety that should have been, and then the sack fumble that was it was a touchdown, and then it was a safety. Wait, nope, never mind. It was a touchback. All of that was happening while the Mariners were just getting blown, like getting their hearts ripped out in the 8th inning of the ALCS, by the way. So that was an incredible sequence of Seattle sports where the refs were trying to get to the bottom of that while the Mariners were getting their hearts broken. And then the blocked field goal. Like, there were so many things where you were like, this is a drunk Seahawks game. They're going to blow it. They're like, this is going to be so stupid. And that's how hapless the Texans were that they couldn't take advantage of it.
I was going to say that's probably those are the circumstances against most NFL teams on offense. The Texans are not most NFL teams right now. Let's get to the other game from tonight. The Lions with a big 24-9 win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We can start at a bunch of different places here. I want to start with the Detroit defense. Like, the fact that this group is coming into this game, and the broadcast did a great job of showing the starters for the Lions secondary and then all the guys that they were replacing. I just want to list off a few names of players that played at least 25 defensive snaps for the Detroit Lions today. Thomas Harper played every defensive snap for the Lions at safety. He wears number 12. He played 66 snaps in this game. Eric Hallett played 62 snaps for the Lions defense. Nick Whiteside played 38 snaps. Arthur Millette played 33 snaps, and Rock Ya-Sin played 28. One of the reasons he played so few is that he also got hurt at some point in this game. And somehow that group of defensive backs for the Detroit Lions pushed Baker Mayfield, Dave, to have the worst game he has had all season.
I love how simpatico we are, and I've only been doing this with y'all for a few months, because in the 4th quarter of this game, I just started researching who the hell all these guys were and where they came from. Like, Nick Whiteside, this was his first NFL start. Undrafted free agent out of Saginaw Valley State. Eric Hallett was a 6th-round pick by the Jaguars and got cut at roster cuts. Spent most of last year on Detroit's practice squad. And you see these guys all the time where you'll get elevated for a week and you get sent back down, or you get elevated for 3 weeks and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's who he's been to this point in his career. If I didn't know any of that shit, I would assume this was like the best secondary in the NFL. The way these guys were flying, they were flying to the ball. Like, they were playing with so much speed, so much confidence, contesting every throw, batting stuff down. Go figure that, like, the guy that I keep saying would be my MVP frontrunner right now just looked, I mean, he was in hell against 5 or 6 dudes that I had never heard of before tonight. And then actually one guy that I had heard of was Tyrus Wheat, former Cowboy, who got claimed off waivers by Detroit, and he's just sort of been on the depth chart for a while, and he's wrecking the game as a pass rusher in the second half. Like, what a What a job by those guys, and obviously Kelvin Shepherd coming up with a game plan and putting them in position to play that way. It was breathtaking.
I want to I'm gonna do the Baker Mayfield thing in a minute, but I do think the sequence to me that was insane by this defense was right before the half. I think it was in the 2-minute. The Bucs had the ball and they throw this little shallow route, I think, to Sterling Shepard, and Amik Robertson over his back punches the ball out. Lions get the ball. They end up going 3 and out, missed the field goal, whatever. So Bucs have the ball again, in the same spot. Baker Mayfield throws another shallow route to K-Dot, and it's a little bit out in front of him. So he's got to go try to grab it on his fingertips and bring it back into his body. I forget which defensive back, but he grips it out of his grip in the air and steals it from him. Otten never really has possession and yanks it out from him. So for those guys to make those plays, and then I think schematically you bring up they played a pretty good game. Robert, you've talked a number of times about the Lamar Jackson game, where they were doing a lot of we're going to drop 8 and then we're going to have one of those guys who was dropping off the line of scrimmage just watch the quarterback. They did that with Derek Barnes against Baker Mayfield a number of times, which Baker has been one of the best and most effective scramblers in the league the last couple of years. And so there were definitely a couple times where they got him spinning and just got him behind the line of scrimmage doing that. So I just thought it was a good game plan. The pass rush looked pretty good, especially with Aleem McNeil back in the lineup.
You felt his impact in the first series he was out there.
Absolutely. And so to get him back, to have your DBs playing the way that were, and then a couple of schematic things, I thought all that was good. And then I honestly just Baker Mayfield was as inaccurate as I've seen him in Tampa Bay. He just missed 10 throws.
We'll get to the Baker thing in a second. I want to just hit a couple more specifics about the Lions defense, because I do really think it speaks to what they've been over the last couple of years. It was so funny, and I think Troy Aikman did a good job of this on the broadcast. He was talking about how, I'm assuming he picked this up while talking to the Lions defensive coaching staff this week. They regret not playing more man coverage against the Chiefs last week. I think they were a little bit scared off by it because of the injuries that they had in the secondary, but this is what they do. And you watch what they did today, and it was a mix. Baker struggled against a lot of zone looks because I think he was making bad decisions against a lot of zone looks. Some of the vertical throws he was trying to put outside the numbers when they were playing a lot of zone, that was kind of a non-starter, and I think was a series of bad decisions that put that offense in a hole. But when they played man, especially on third down, they were playing a lot of cover one robber, and so the second safety would drop down. They have a post safety, and then the second safety would drop down into all of those crossing routes that the Bucs like to run on third down. And it was just beautifully designed and game planned. It's we're just going to drop a guy into that crossing route, and then if we take that away very quickly and we force him to come off of that, we think that our pass rush can start getting there and affecting these plays. And it was happening over and over and over again. And Dan Campbell said something to Laura Rutledge at halftime that I thought was so telling. She was asking him about how they were getting this play out of all of these backup DVs. And he said, what we told them during the week was, just know where your help is. And that's a subtle throwaway line to a sideline reporter. But if you think about what the Lions have been over the last couple of years, Derek, and you watch them play man coverage, that's why they're so good at it. It's because they play as a collective unit in man, as well as any team in football over the last 2 seasons, no matter who is playing in the secondary. They have such a good sense of how to pass things off, how to funnel things to those extra bodies, where they're not bringing a ton of heat. And so there are extra zone defenders sitting there, and they know exactly how to push people to those guys. And they're doing it with backups. And I just think, even with Aaron Glenn gone, Kelvin Shepherd deserves a lot of credit. And the other guy, Deshae Townsend, is their passing game coordinator. He came in last year it was his first season with the team. And you saw them just play man at such a better clip than they'd ever had before. And he is still with that staff. And so the combination of him and Kelvin Shepherd just deserves so much credit for them looking like the defense they have on the back end over the last 2 years in those man coverage situations, no matter who seems to be playing back there.
That's honestly, it's such a great point and illustration of how they do this. Because part of obviously being a good man coverage team is you just have the guys to run with people. But a lot of it too is communication and passing stuff off. Like you mentioned with them playing a lot of the robbery, and they'll have the safety come out of the roof and drive on a lot of those shallow routes. He ends up taking that guy in man. And then a lot of times, whoever is that guy trailing him in man coverage will just fall off and become the robber. They will just trade responsibilities. And so you have to trust that your teammate is going to go pick that up if you want to fall off of that and go be the robber. And so you mentioned all of that. I thought last year especially, but like still this year, they were one of the best teams that I've like ever seen in terms of like sorting out bunches and making sure everybody's covering.
It was
the right guy and
unbelievable.
playing with leverage. Like it was like watching ballet or something. Like
it was
the way that
balletic.
they
That's
did
exactly the word
Yes.
I would use to describe it. It really was.
It was just like you rarely see guys move with that much confidence in that tight of a space like that playing man coverage. So they're just a very cool unit to watch. And like when they have their guys, it looks even cooler. But to do it with literally almost all backups compared to what their week 1 lineup was, it's unbelievable.
The Bucs' second drive of the fourth quarter was just a work of art, and that was the 18 play drive where the Bucs needed 18 snaps to gain 60 yards. Just the epitome of a chess match where like it's always getting to third down or fourth down. The Bucs had to survive like a strip sack to even keep it going. They got all the way to the red zone, just every like not really letting them break anything explosive all the way down the field. Like everything y'all just described, guys just knowing where to be, knowing where each other needs to be, making tackles, and to make the Bucs waste half of the quarter, and B, not let them get any points out of it when you're on the field for 18 snaps. That's awesome. It was really cool.
Let's have the Baker Mayfield conversation, because this is pretty easily the worst game he has played so far this year. And, obviously there's some hints that the Bucs offense was a little bit more volatile than some of the high end stuff would lead you to believe, right? So the Bucs came into this game, Baker came into this game 17th in dropback success rate among all quarterbacks in the NFL. He was 6th in EPA per dropback. And that's explained by a bunch of different things. He's had a bunch of high leverage scrambles. They were pretty explosive. But like you mentioned, Derek, the Lions did such a good job of consciously taking away those plays where he's creating a little bit, where he's able to scramble. And then pretty much every time they tried to push the ball down the field, they came up empty in this game. And so a lot of the explosive coin flip type high variance plays that went the Bucs' way over the first 6 weeks of the season, none of them went their way tonight. And I think that's the version of their offense you get on the other side of that.
Yeah, this was kind of like, what if the Bucs offense just didn't hit Emeka Egbuka on a post route every 3 drives? Like that is, this is kind of like, and it was a little
they
bit
tried.
Worse, like they sure tried. And like it that's a little bit of an exaggeration, because I think Baker Mayfield has maybe been a little bit volatile this year, but I do think this, like tonight in particular, he was just particularly out of sorts. And I think some of it was the interior pressure. I thought even like when they weren't doing some of the spy stuff, just the way that they were squeezing the air out of the pocket to their best of their ability instead of just overrunning and letting him get out, I thought was really good. And then obviously in a couple of those high leverage situations on some 3rd and 7s and stuff like that, they would kind of just let Barnes sit there and hunt him down whenever he tried to go do his thing. And so that didn't always lead to a sack, but it led to a lot of like, oh, that guy's still watching me. I have to quick throw this ball out that I didn't want to throw, and now it's short of the sticks and we're not able to complete it. So I just thought that they had a really good game plan in that sense of not letting him get out. And then again, Baker Mayfield was just very, like you mentioned, in a lot of the zone stuff, he was just not comfortable, I think, finding his spots in a way that he has been for largely the last like year and a half, where I think he's been better at that. But tonight he just really wasn't.
He was trying to win the game with every throw. I mean,
yeah,
there were so many underneath options. If you go back and you watch some of those plays where if he wants to take a 5-6 yard completion on a 1st and 10, those were available to him today. I just think that he was skittish and erratic and just a little bit out of sorts in ways that he really hasn't been. Obviously, there's always going to be that little bit of an edge to the way that he plays, but that was typically a good thing for the Bucs over the first 6 weeks. Today, we got the bad kind of downside of him being wired the way that he is.
He was just like 2 notches too tweaked up, because so many of his misses were high too. Like he had like the one to the back corner that could have easily been a touchdown. He just overthrew his man. He overthrew, he had a couple shots where the guy was open in the zone, and he just, a lot of receivers like reaching back over their head to try to like snag Baker balls tonight, like just consistently too high. I'd have to watch it again to know for sure, but it felt like at least 4 or 5 balls that could have been caught if they were not so high.
I was trying to find the numbers on it. Aiden Hutchinson just really affected the game so much today. Like you just felt him throughout the entire game. And so I actually did find it. So he finished the game with 7 pressures. And so consistently affecting the quarterback. He was chipped on 49% of the Bucs offense, the Bucs dropbacks in this game per next gen stats. I believe over the course of the season, TJ Watt is leading the league at like 25%. And so it's just an absurd rate to like give extra help. And after the Charlie Heck game from last year, I can understand where the Bucs felt like they needed to do that. But again, it just elements of the Lions defense quietly affecting the way that the Bucs offense fell down in this game. And the Bucs just decided not to run the ball whatsoever. Maybe because they couldn't, but they just decided they weren't even going to try.
Charlie Heck made a great block on the Tez Johnson touchdown.
What you dream of as an offensive lineman.
And
what you dream of.
I was like on my couch. I was like, Charlie Heck? And then 45 minutes later, I was like, Charlie Heck. Oh.
You forget that the Bucs still have like several offensive line injuries that they're dealing with, and then they play a really good team. It's like, oh yeah, the Bucs have several offensive line injuries that they're dealing with.
And Mike Evans is out for the foreseeable future now, by the way. Todd Bowles said afterward that it's a collarbone, so it's at least a while. Even it might not be a season ender, but he's not going to be back anytime soon.
I want to get this right. TJ Watt has actually been chipped on 39% of opponent dropbacks this season, which is the highest rate in the entire NFL. Myles Garrett's at 30%. Those are the only two guys above 30%. But again, Aiden Hutchinson was at 49% today per next gen. On the other side of the ball, I actually thought the Bucs defense played really well in this game. I thought that they were really getting after the Lions. They were blitzing a bunch. Like Yaya Diaby was playing with his hair on fire. I thought the front played really well. And for the most part, down to down, it was tough sledding for the Lions rushing offense. Unfortunately, you just get a couple monster Jahmyr Gibbs runs. I mean, that 78-yarder you watch, and that 78-yarder, something very important detail on that play. No Vita Vea on that play. And you watch the two double teams on that run and the movement that they get on the right side with Tate Ratledge and Penei Sewell. And this offensive line is still capable of doing that. They did not do it as often tonight against this Bucs front, but they did it enough times with him off the field to do the damage they needed to do.
That play was legitimately like, how every now and then someone asks, like, do you think you could get a yard in an NFL game? That play was literally blocked so well that like we could have. Like they moved people like 4 yards off the ball.
Speak for yourself. I'm not willing to put that on the record. Just
I can fall forward fast enough when those guys are blocking that way. I can fall forward fast enough. But like that, I agree. Like I thought the Bucs generally played pretty well in this game. Like I thought the pressure was really good. Like Yaya Diaby, I think continues to be like a really impressive player for them. And so there were still a couple of moments, especially early on, where they were able to get their throws over the middle of the field. But that was kind of what we talked about coming in. It was going to be the push and pull of like, how many of those throws can they get versus how many moments, are they going to be able to drop out a guy and make Jared Goff hold the ball for a half a second longer? And a guy like, Vita Vea, maybe he pushes the pocket. Or I thought David Montgomery actually had a pretty tough night in pass protection. And so they were kind of getting him a number of times, and that led to some Goff pressures. So I thought the Bucs defense played well, and they should not feel worse for having lost this game. Like this was not on them outside of, again, one huge Gibbs run, but he kind of does that to a lot of people.
Dave, last week we did a team tiers episode on the Athletic Football Show, and we tiered the top 2 were like true Super Bowl or bust contenders, and then one step down was playoff teams. Teams that we think are good, teams that are going to make the playoffs, maybe aren't in that top tier of teams. We had the Lions in the first tier, we had the Bucs in the second tier, and I think that's just kind of where I sit with this game. It's like, though I think the Bucs are still a good team. I think the Lions are one of the best teams in the league. Like, I don't think it has to be any more complicated than that. And I think that was expressed in the way that we talked about these teams as recently as a week ago.
Yeah. And that conversation made me question myself because we talked about it. It's like, well, what don't the Bucs have? Why don't you view them as a Super Bowl contender? And that can be a long and nuanced conversation. But watching the game, I was like, yeah, we had this right. Like there are levels to this thing. And I guess if I'm a Bucs fan, I still think, you got a long season to go and you can still count on some reinforcements coming back. Luke Gadecki will be there at some point, Chris Godwin. But I said it at the time too. I mean, Mike Evans is now out. Like you can't, this idea of having all these receivers available is starting to look more and more like a daydream. And so you're probably not ever going to have the full complement of what you want to have. And if you don't, this can be what it looks like.
Now we'll see what happens with Hassan Reddick. He left this game injured. You'll get Bucky Irving back. And so hopefully, at the end of it, if you look at the aggregate, you'll get more guys back than you'll have lost by the time you get to the end of it. And you're playing in an NFC South where I think you're still definitively the best team, which is helpful. But I do think that if we're tearing this thing out, there is a gap between the Lions and the Bucs. And I think that you saw that gap tonight.
I do think, yes, absolutely, yes. But this game could have been a lot more stressful if a few inflection points go the other way. Like I don't think a whole lot less of the Bucs.
No. I don't think so. I don't think so either.
The better team. Yeah.
I think it more so to me, it speaks more to the resilience and just how not fragile the Lions are than it speaks to any deficiencies with the Bucs. I think that's kind of where I land with it.
Robert, you talked coming into the season where, like, are we going to feel about the Lions given all the change? Are you one of those teams? The way that we felt about the Ravens sustaining for however long that they did it with John Harbaugh and stuff. And it's like, this is a game where it's like, yeah, you beat the Bucs are the 8th best team in the NFL, maybe 9th, something like that. And you like handled them pretty well, like despite all the change and all the not having any of your DBs, like they're one of those teams.
They've answered that bell at every single turn this year. I think that's been undeniable.
And I want to bottle whatever I want to bottle whatever's coming out of there. I mean, like that defensive performance. Like I know the Aaron Glenn era in New York is not off to a great start, but like it's understandable why NFL teams are trying to bite off a piece of what they got going on up there.
Their give a shit factor is extremely high, and that goes a long way over a very long and tough NFL season. I think you saw that tonight. All right, it's 1:25 a.m. Central Time, which means it's heading toward 2:30 a.m. Eastern Time. If any of you weirdos are still watching this, I sincerely appreciate it. Hopefully some of you are watching it on Tuesday morning, which it now is, I guess, later on Tuesday morning. I hope you're checking this out. The Monday Hangover should also be in your YouTube feeds a little bit later on Tuesday. Those go up about 12 p.m. Central Time, about noon. But that is available in your podcast feed whenever you guys want to take a look at it. So a lot of good stuff coming your way. Thanks for sticking with us over a very long 36 hours or so, probably more than 36 hours since we started that London game. It's much appreciated. Hope you enjoyed it. We certainly did. We will talk to you guys very soon.